All right, today's Fix It Friday, which is going to be on Wednesday this week because of the way that the cohorts are divided up, is going to be on the bandsaw in the shop. This is something I like to go over with all the kids at one point in time so that they understand how a bandsaw works, how you set it up, and then how you actually change a blade on it. So for starters, I've gone into several shops where the bandsaws are not adjusted properly or they're not set up correctly. And when that happens, it does two things. Number one, it can wear away the bandsaw, and number two, it can be very dangerous. So a couple of the things that I want to go over with you. Right here, let me just kind of zoom in so you can see them a little better. There we go. Those are guide bearings. And what those guide bearings do is they keep the actual blade from twisting too far left or twisting too far right. Now, those are called blade guides. If you look in the rear back here, let me get a better picture at it. There's also a blade guide that is in the rear of the machine. I'm trying to get a better view on it. I'm not doing too good. There it is. So if you look where my finger is, there is also a guide bearing there. Now what that guide bearing does is that allows the blade not to be pushed back too far into or pushed off of the wheel. So if you look what I mean by the wheel, this is the wheel in which the blade is encompassed. So if you look, that blade, if I can zoom in on it, there we go. That blade is in the center of that wheel. So you can see right here, the blade is centered on the tire and on the wheel. It's right here. It's this part from right there to right there. It gives me about 3/8 of an inch in the back of the blade and 3/8 inch in the front. If I don't adjust that bearing, which is in the back, which you can see right between that oblong hole right there, you can see that I have about a 1/16 inch gap. So if it was over that, what happens is when I'm pushing a board into this blade and I'm pushing real hard, it'll actually push the blade off the wheel. Hence the reason when we go over the bandsaw, we tell you that it's very important that you don't back out of a very long cut because there are no bearings in the front of a bandsaw. So if the board gets bound on the blade then, if we can see this, I'm probably making you dizzy, the blade will pull out like this and it'll actually pull off of the wheel and it'll snap or it'll at least scare the mess out of you. If it doesn't pull it off, it'll break the blade. So these bearings, which are on the top, are also underneath. And it's kind of hard to see them, but as you can see the bearings. But I'm gonna work on the top ones today and to show you how to adjust those. So if you pay attention and, I'm going to show you how to do that, and then I'm going to show you how to actually take a blade off and put a blade on. So the first thing you want to do, if this was not adjusted properly, which it currently is, you should have about a 1/16, and let me zoom in on it one more time. Let me see if I can get that. There we go. So you should have about a 1/16 of an inch to the left of this blade and a 1/16 an inch to the right of the blade. So overall, there should be about an 1/8 inch gap in here. Now, the blade should never actually ride on those unless you're twisting the blade. It should always just be used as a guide. If it rides on them, it's eventually just going to wear the bearings out. Secondly, the thing you want to look at is the teeth, where they're located. The teeth should just be in front of those bearings. If the teeth are behind the bearings, they're going to cut into the bearings themselves. Just like if you go over to Mr. Marie's in his metal shop, his saws are set up to cut metal. Well, these are metal bearings. This saw blade will cut these if it's riding against it constantly. So those are the type of things you want to look at, especially if you buy a new bandsaw. I've gone to several shops, like I said, and I constantly see people that don't have these set up correctly. They get them out of the box and assume that they're already set up, and they go ahead and then they vibrate like heck. The blades aren't right. The blades are always falling off. They're not centered on the guide wheel. So these are the type of things we're going to go over today. So if you look over here, and this is a lot of times what people try to adjust, there is a thumb screw here. So what we're going to do is we're going to loosen that. I tighten these with a pair of pliers because I don't want kids to think that they can loosen this to adjust this up and down, because the knob to adjust it for up and down is up top here. So what we're going to do, I'm going to grab a pair of pliers. I'm going to take this and I don't have it crazy tight, just tight enough so that kids can't loosen it, because I like to keep the bearings where they go. And I'm just going to loosen it real easy. And then if you look here, there's also an Allen key. So if I take this and I'm going to loosen this here, Now what that does is that gives me the ability to move those bearings either in or out to go closer to the blade or farther away. Now as you can see, the bearings right now, like we said before, are about a 1/16. If I take this here and I go like this, now if you can see the gap, I have about an 1/8 inch gap in there, and I can also take this one and do the same thing, and now I have a huge gap in between there. Let me see if I can get a better angle. But that's not the gap I want, so what you need to do is they're on an eccentric or an oblong piece of metal, so as I turn them, as you can see, they get further away, and as I keep turning, they'll come back around and get closer to the blade. So I want it to be about a 1/16, and the same thing over here. So I'm going to turn that one, so it's about a 1/16. Once you do that, you're going to go over here, and you're going to tighten this Allen key back up. I'm trying to see things through the camera and also do. So I tighten this back up, and that's adjusted. Make sure that that's snug. Now that side bearing that you can see through this oblong hole right here, as you can see, it's about a 1/16. It's about a 1/16 of an inch. So that bearing is right there, right where my fingernail is. There's a bearing back behind that metal plate. If I want that to go in closer or further out, depending on where the blade is, or what thickness of blade that you have, or width of blade, I should actually say. See that nut I just loosened here? And then there's a thumb screw here. Now if you look inside of there, you're going to see that bearing move in and out. Okay, so there's my bearings moving. That's so I don't touch the blade, if you can kind of see what's moving. And I'll move it back to where it belongs. So there's your guide bearings at the right right there's about perfect. So then we tighten that thumb screw up, and then on the back side here there's an additional thumb screw, which is right here, and we loosen that, and that'll adjust this guide bearing. So let's look in between where that oblong hole is, and you can see now I have that bearing touching against the blade. Now if you can see what's actually moving, you can see where the light's coming through. Now it's way out. So you want to have that about a 1/16. And yes, that should ride against the ball bearing whenever you are pushing in to make a cut. It keeps the blade, I'm pushing on it with my finger right now, but it keeps the blade from popping off of the wheel. Once you get those tight, once you get those adjusted properly, you want to tighten both of these. Now, the times that you would want to do this is when you change the width of the blade, or even change the blade itself. You want to make sure that all these are adjusted properly. And now you're not just going to do it on the top, you're also going to do it underneath. But because of the lack of light underneath of there and my camera skills, I'm not going to show you that underneath of there. But it operates the same way. You got your same set screws, you got your same bearings, you got your same bearing in the back. So it all operates the same way. It's just underneath of the machine, and that's your bottom set of guide bearings, and this is your top set of guide bearings. So now we're going to go over how you actually change a blade. So the first thing you do when you come over here to change a blade is, the reason you usually change a blade is for two reasons. It's either gotten dull, or the the blade has broke. So what you normally need to do is you come over here and you see this orange handle. Let's go over here so you can see it a little better. You're going to pick up on this orange handle, you're going to pull out, and you're going to drop it down. That takes the tension off of the top wheel. It allows the top wheel to shift down. So then I'm going to open my top door, I'm going to open my bottom door. Okay. I'm going to put you guys up on the tripod so you can see what I'm doing, so that I can work and you can see. There we go, and I'm going to adjust you down just a little bit. There we go. You can kind of see the whole machine now. So now what you're going to do, I need two hands for this, so I loosen this, then I'm going to loosen this knob at the top of the machine. Let me just make sure you can see that, which you cannot. So let me just show you right here. This is the top knob. This drops this wheel down, which will allow me to get the blade out. So I'm going to take my throat plate out. I'm going to take this table wedge out. Now the table wedge, what it does is, because you cut a big cut through the metal, what the table wedge does is if you don't have this table wedge, then you actually end up with a step here, so when you're cutting, it's not going to be even. So all these do, and these are on every table saw. Some people discard these and think they don't need them. What it is it is shaped like a wedge. So when you push that in there, it actually evens the two tables. So I push this in. Right now I have a step right here. So when I push this in, it actually makes this table even with this table. So don't ever throw these out. I've seen guys take these and just throw them out. So hold on to these, they're important. You go like that there. We're going to loosen this bottom knot, this bottom wheel, and as you can see, the blade is getting loose. Now I can just pull it off. I can go like this here. Then I can pull it outside of here. So there's your blade. Now, in order to wrap one of these blades up, what you need to do is you take one hand and you take the other hand, you take one over top the other, and they fold together like that. For those of you that play baseball, I know that every single one of you, or lacrosse, has probably thrown a ball into a jug net. That's those nets that fold up, or maybe you have a tent, or you go hunting and there's a pop-up tent. These things are the hardest things for kids to figure out, is how to actually fold those things up and get them back in the bag. So to get them to come back apart, you go like this and you throw them on the ground. Okay? You want to make sure that your teeth, when you put it on the wheel, are facing in the downward direction. So right now they're in the downward direction. You thread it back through the table. You come back through here. You put it on your top and bottom wheel. Sometimes it's hard, and it's nice to have a partner to do this because it wants to fall off of certain things. But we'll get it. That goes like that. This goes here. It gets flossed into here. There we go. You want to make sure that that blade obviously goes in those bearings that we just went over, into the guide bearing. It's the same thing in the bottom, like I told you. They're in the bottom as well. Get the thing all the way through there. You got a blade guard here that it has to floss up through. There we go. I'm into the bottom wheels, into the bottom guides, and then I'm just going to pull up on the top and get it onto the top wheel. Once you do that, you're going to come around to the back of the machine, and you're going to see that on the back of the machine, there is a spring back here. So under that spring, there's a little red disc, and it actually tells you what tension to set your blade at. The current blade that we have should be set, the tension is set by the width of the blade. The blade that we have is a 3/8" blade. So if I zoom in real close to this, and let me see if you can see it, you can see that there are different measurements on there. The top one is 3/4, this one is a half, then 3/8, then 1/4, then 1/8. Those numbers are the width of the blade that you want to adjust to. So when I pick up on this orange handle, I'm going to show you that inside of this spring, you'll see a little red wafer in there. If you can see it, it's right there. It's kind of hard. It's a little bit dusty, but there's a little red wafer. That wafer should be right on the 3/8 mark, right where the top of my fingernail is. So right now it's not tight enough because it's a little bit below that. It's actually at 1/4 if you can see it. So I'm going to drop my handle back down. That's this orange handle that we moved in the beginning. I'm going to take this top handle. I'm going to tighten it a little bit. I'm going to pick back up on my handle, and I'm going to see if I'm at 3/8 yet. I'm still a little bit shy of 3/8, so I need to tighten it a little bit more. I'm going to tighten it up just a little bit more. I'm going to pick back up on this handle. And that little red wafer is just about there. Could use another half a torque. So I'm going to loosen it down, tighten it up a little bit more, and that'll do it. If you can see, that red disc is right on 3/8 now. Now that I have that, if it needed to be tighter, like for a 3/4" blade, you would continue just to tighten that handle and continue to pick up on the orange handle until it got to the 3/4. So now what you want to do is you want to make sure that your blade stays centered on the actual wheel. So if it doesn't, then you need, let me zoom in on that so you can see. There we go. So you want to spin this by hand. You don't want to go ahead and spin this by turning the machine on, because if it's not centered, it's going to fall off of there. So right now, as you can see, because I didn't make any adjustments, my blade is actually centered on that wheel. If it was not centered on there, what you need to do is you come back here And there's a knob back here with a lock washer, okay? So what you do is you take this, and if you tighten this in, it pushes the wheel forward. If you loosen it, it pulls the wheel backwards. When it does that, it will allow this blade to either go forward on the wheel or backwards on the wheel. So now you also want to make sure, like I said, the teeth are facing downward. So these are the teeth. You make sure they're facing downward. Once you do that, everything else is in reverse order. Give it a free spin, as if you ever heard Mr. Marie say on the metal lathes over there, everything gets a free spin because it doesn't cost you anything. Make sure you give it a spin like this. Make sure that everything works. Once you do that, you put your throat plate back in. That comes over here. Your throat plate gets pushed back into place. Your table wedge gets pushed back into place to make your two tables even. Let me see if I can show you what I mean by even. As you can see, the one table is a little bit higher than the other. So when I put this wedge in, now if you look across there, the two tables are exactly parallel with one another or flush with each other. So don't ever throw away that pin. That's an important part to your bandsaw. Now, all we got to do now is close our upper wheel guard, our lower wheel guard, and you're ready to turn it on. I never take and turn a machine on and just let it go full power, especially after I just changed something. So what you want to do, you want to go over here and just turn it on and off real quick, just to make sure that that blade's not going to come flying off of there. So it seems to be working pretty good. I'm going to open up the wheel guard again just to double check my blade placement. If all of that's good, you want to check your bearings like we went over before to make sure that that blade stayed in the same place it was supposed to. So this one here did. Like I said, the things that we're looking for, these teeth right here should be about a 1/16 of front of the blade. There should be about a 1/16 inch gap in between the blade from here to here. And there should be about a 1/16 inch gap. Let me see if I can zoom in for you. Not real good. There should be a 1/16 inch gap from the back of this blade to this bearing. If that's all adjusted, obviously you want to come down and look underneath too, just to make sure that those things are all situated. And like I said, it's kind of dark in there, so I'm not going to be able to show you real well, but I can see it, just not able to get it on camera. So you want to check your guide bearings. If any of those things are off, you want to fix them, and then you're good to go. So that gives you the general rundown on how to take a bandsaw blade off, how to adjust the guide bearings, how to make sure that it's centered on the wheel, how to wind up a bandsaw blade, and how to install a bandsaw blade. So these are all things that I would normally be going over with you in class, but I figure if I can get some of this stuff done while you're on virtual learning, we'll try to do that while you're at home, and we can try to kill two birds with one stone. So there you have it.